Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to my DxO Photo Lab Ask Me Anything live stream. And this is a special live stream for today because the 20% discount for DxO products is going to end late tonight or tomorrow. So I wanted to come here live to my audience, and if you have any questions about the DxO, especially Photo Lab, that's the one I'm most familiar with. I'm here to answer them for you. And I also wanted to just kind of go through my workflow a little bit and some of the tools in DxO, and also kind of demo some of the other features in DxO. And, I have my affiliate links down below, robtrek.com/DxO, as well as coupon code RobTrekSummer 2026. So if you do that, you get 20% off their products, and it's a one-time license fee. So I'll start with that. Uh, Basically, you buy it once and you own it for life. You don't have to continually pay, the monthly fees like some of the other products out there, namely Adobe. Um, and what that gets you basically is you can install DxO on up to 3 different computers. They can be Mac or Windows or mix and match, doesn't matter, but up to 3 computers and 2 years of updates. And typically the updates are, camera compatibility. So when a new camera comes out or new lenses, they're continually adding lenses to their database. Uh, and But surprisingly, in this last update in version 9.6, they actually updated the denoising engine as well, which is the first time I've seen that in the 5 years I've been using DxO. Uh, so you never know. They might introduce some significant updates like that in version 9. We're up to version 9.9. I think it's 9.9.1, but in any case, DxO Photolab is my photo editor of choice, and I use it about 99% of the time in my photo editing chores. Uh, so I wanted to just show you in real time that workflow of editing a photo so you can see the kind of results you can get. And, I encourage you to download the free trial, but if you want to get the 20% discount, you have to do that today or tomorrow. So uh, in the chat section, I know there's not a lot of people here right now, but in the chat section, if you have any questions, uh, about DxO, either, separately or while I'm going through my workflow and some of the tools, I'll go ahead and ask them and I'll do my best to answer them. Now, of course, DxO offers several other products like Nick Collection and Film Pack, uh, Viewpoint. And honestly, I don't use those too much. I do use Nick Collection actually about 20% of my workflow. Particularly, I like the HDR function in uh, the Nick Collection. And Nick Collection has several modules in there that do all different things. And, like I said, I really only use the HDR one. I sometimes use the classic camera, or I forget what it's called, but there's another module there in Nick Collection that has a bunch of presets that I really like. And so you know, Nick Collection I'm more familiar with, and I don't get too deep into all the different tools in the collection, other than say the HDR and the presets, which I really like. And there's also PureRaw 6.0. So there's a couple of ways to think about the DxO products, right? You can kind of get their all-in-one DxO Photolab 9, which has the latest denoising engine from DxO, as well as a lot of tools, a lot of presets, film effects, things like that. So I really think DxO Photolab 9 is your best single purchase from DxO to get away from, say, or to, if you're new to DxO and photo editing software, that's the best place to start. Now, there's a lot of people that are using other photo editors. There's lots of them out there. And namely like Adobe Lightroom, I'm most familiar with because I used that for many, many years before I switched over to DxO. I still use it time to time for certain things, and I'll get into that. But the you know, as you know, Lightroom is a subscription model, and they recently purchased Topaz, right? So maybe their denoising engine is going to get a little better. But I think it's hands down, DxO's noise reduction algorithms are, the best, in my opinion. Now, there's some limitations to the DxO Photo Lab and products in general, but and I'll go over what those are, but they're not deal breakers in my opinion. So we'll get into that. But good to see everyone. Um, I see Giuseppe's here and Siam is here, and Kevin. Always good to see you, and Henning. You guys are my regulars, and I really appreciate you supporting the channel, um, and joining me on the live streams. And one other thing I want to mention is that just about every week on Fridays, I do live photo editing of your photos using DxO Photo Lab. So there's, but what better way to demonstrate the software than with your own photos, right? Because a lot of the review videos that you see here on YouTube, they're great, but they're all cherry-picked images, right? And they best demonstrate all of the different features in Photolab. But not everyone shoots, landscapes, or not everyone does birding, right? Uh, some people do portraits. I don't do a lot of portraits myself, but there's certainly a lot of different genres that people focus on, and you want to know how the software is going to work for your particular or primary genre that you like to shoot, and that's why I do the Photolab live streams on Fridays, editing your photos and showing you how DxO works with those kind of images. Okay, so let me just get into it. I made a bunch of notes here, so you're going to see me referring to these time to time because I didn't want to miss anything. But uh, let me talk about just briefly because I just want to get the main points out of the way. Some of the limitations of, well, let's start with some of the key advantages. I've already talked about the denoising. I think is the best. I think the workflow, the control points, the masking, uh, are also really very intuitive, very easy to use. They also introduced AI masking, which had a few wrinkles when it was first launched, but now it's very, very smooth, very reliable on my Windows machine. And of course, Mac has always been working well with the DxO products. Uh, and so those are the key things, right? The AI masking, the luminance and chroma masking with the control points, control lines, and other tools, the denoising, and also the optics module. Now, the optics module, basically what it does is it ignores the in-camera uh, optical corrections that they do. DxO is, it's AI driven on their end, but ultimately what you get is an optics module that does distortion corrections, chromatic aberration, vignetting, and lens softness uh, to just about to a specific lens and camera combination. So, for example, I typically use like my 12 to 45 with my OM3, and I'm going to get a very uh, uh, specific profile for that camera and lens combination. Now, if I were to use my 12 to 45 on, say, a Panasonic G9 Mark II, or even an older Panasonic GX1, I'm going to get a very specific profile made for that camera and lens combination. And that is one of the key things in improving the sharpness and quality of the lens. And it just takes, even the cheapest lens like kit lenses, my 14 to 42, my 40 to 150 kit lenses, and makes them perform nearly as well as my pro level lenses, which cost, in some cases 10 times the price. Uh, Now, all things being equal, you're going to get an excellent image either way, but when you apply these optical corrections, say to a kit lens, and then apply the same optical corrections to a pro lens, it evens out a little bit. The pro lens is always going to give you the better image, right? But it does even it out quite a bit to where I don't feel the need to buy a pro lens uh, for a lot of the use cases or in my bag, because I can get the same or virtually the same image quality just using a kit lens. So I would argue that rather than upgrading a lens, you know, consider DxO Photolab, as an upgrade to all your lenses, right? Because of this optics module, it's just amazing what it can do. And I would say those are the core things, right? That I think is best about the DxO Photolab. The same holds true for the most part. Like if you get a more niche product like the Pure Raw 6, that is strictly the optics module and denoising. It does have some masking abilities as well. I don't use Pure Raw 6 because I have Photolab 9. But there's other products like Pure Raw 6. But before I go into that, let me talk about some of the, I would say, weaknesses or missing. It's really not weaknesses. These are things that are missing in DxO Photolab as of right now. It does not have any kind of layering capability, like if you want to do HDR and exposure blending, or if you want to do focus stacking, things like that, it cannot do. Any kind of layering type editing where you have multiple images and you're going to layer them on top of each other, and you're going to try to, typically you do exposure blending or focus stacking, right? Another missing feature is panoramas. There's no way to stitch multiple photos together, again, because it's panoramas, where you take, say, 9 shots, right? You do a 3x3 grid, is basically another layering type of photo editing, right? You're layering multiple images together and then creating the panorama. So panorama is kind of included in that as part of, there's really no layering ability, but specifically that you can't do panoramas. And focus stacking, right? I mentioned that, I think, already. So these things you cannot do. Focus stacking, HDR, and panoramas, which you can find in a lot of other software these days. Now, I would argue that uh, even the built-in HDR and panorama and focus stacking that you find in, say, Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop, it's not as good as the alternatives. So I find I don't use the built-in features in Photoshop and Lightroom for my HDR panoramas and focus stacking. I like to use third-party software. You can find free versions out there that do an okay job, but I'll start with panoramas. There's a free software right now. It's still available. It's called AutoPanaGiga. AutoPanaGiga. You can Google that, download it. It's free, and it does a far better job. Has many more options and controls to do panoramas, and it's way superior to what you can do in, say, Lightroom and Photoshop and just about any other software that is sort of an all-in-one, right? Also, for HDR, I use Nick Collection. So that one is not free. You have to buy that separately, but Nick Collection does the best HDR, has a lot of great presets and a lot of controls. Again, far superior to anything you can do in any other software. And I think it's a worthy upgrade or companion to DxO Photolab. You don't have to get it, right? But if you do a lot of HDR, uh, I would highly recommend it. Nick Collection has some other things which we'll get into, but that's what I use for my HDR. And then for focus stacking, I use Helicon Focus. So uh, you will need to spend a little bit more if you do those other types of features. Uh, you know, based on the software that I recommend, Helicon Focus, AutoPanaGiga, which is free, and then the Nick Collection, which has more than just HDR. It has a lot of stuff, which I can touch on a little bit. So So those are the things that are missing in Photolab that you can supplement with something more superior. And there are free options. Like if you like to do focus stacking, there's something called uh, Picolay, Picolay. It's a free photo focus stacking software that works pretty well. I've used it time to time. It's not as good as, say, Helicon Focus, which is a paid app. I think I paid $80 for it. But if you do a lot of focus stacking, you should just get Helicon Focus. But if you only do focus stacking time to time, you can try Picolay, and there's a lot of tutorials online for that. And hands down, AutoPana Giga is better than any paid software I've ever seen. And then for HDR, I haven't found a really good HDR software. I've tried a few, and they work okay, but yeah, not a fan. I think a free photo editing software that you can consider maybe that I'm familiar with is GIMP. GIMP does layering. So if you do HDR, you can do layering and exposure blending that way. I know there's others out there like Darktable, and I think the Affinity or Canva is free now, and it has some features like that built in, which you can try. So that may be also a good companion to Photolab. Is something like Canva, which is free, but nothing beats, Photolab in raw processing of your images. One other thing that is missing is really, I would say is weak, is the denoising for JPEGs and other file formats. The DxO denoising engine is built specifically for raw images. So for OM systems, it would be the .rof, for OM systems and Olympus, .nef for Nikon, these raw images, and the reason it's so superior to any other denoising software is because it denoises while it's demosaicing the image, or basically interpolating a raw image into an image that we can see with our eyes, right? Because raw images are just basically data points, ones and zeros. And there's a demosaicing process that goes on uh, with Bayer sensors. I don't want to get too technical, but DxO is the only software that I'm aware of that denoises at the demosaicing level, pixel by pixel. Most other denoising software, the program will demosaic the image first, and then it'll use some sort of AI algorithm to reduce the noise. So it's not as good as, it's just like denoising. Uh, but that's why these other softwares can denoise, say, JPEGs and TIFFs and other file formats, because it's not demosaicing the image first, it's just denoising the image after it's been demosaic. So it's not as good, and you're not going to be able to extract as much detail as you can when you denoise at the pixel level, or at the binary level, really, when we're talking about raw images. And there's some interesting denoising software that I'm looking at for JPEGs and things like that, but I'll maybe talk about that in another video. So uh, that's why DxO is so good, because of the optics module and because of the denoising algorithm. And everything runs on your computer, including the AI masking and the AI driven optics modules and such. And then I guess one other, right on the tip of my tongue, there was one other thing that you may want to consider. Well, when it comes to me, I'll just blurt it out. It may be a tangent to other things, but it'll come back to me. Okay, so that's DxO Photolab. Now I've touched on a few other software that they have, like Nik Collection. Nik Collection has their two main software in there, and they've just added more recently Perspective, which is interesting. But and I haven't tried yet, but I'd like to. Is, again, I mentioned HDR, but also the Silver Effects. Silver Effects is by far the best black and white photo editor out there. It gives you so many controls. when you're editing color images and converting them to black and white, you have a lot of controls in the color response and tonal ranges of each color when it's being converted to black and white, because basically you're taking a color and converting it to a grayscale, and the silver effects gives you tremendous control over that. And again, it has the same masking and AI tools and all of that, but it doesn't denoise. They do have a denoising uh, module in Nick Collection, which will work on JPEGs, I believe, but it's nothing near what you can do in Photolab or PureRaw for that matter. So uh, I like Nick Collection. Let me just check my Nick Collection page here real quick. I mentioned the two that I use the most, but I'll just, yeah, Nick Define is the noise reduction. And what it does is it samples areas of noise in the image and then, uses some algorithm to try to reduce that. Uh, but they have color effects, analog effects. That's the one. I've used that time to time. Basically, it's a bunch of presets and film simulations, uh, for retro and vintage and toy camera stuff. Nick Perspective is new. I'm going to have to try that one. And then Viveza, which is, if you're really into color, Viveza is supposed to really give you very, very fine control over the color in your images. But I've not used it. I used it once or twice. It has one feature that was really good at, when I had some white balance issues, it was really good at fixing those for me. But I never get that precise with color. Then Nick Sharpener, that's sort of an intelligent sharpening tool. That does a good job too. Um, but again, they're not tools I use because I primarily use Photolab for all of my sharpening, denoising, and editing and grading of colors, things like that. Uh, One other thing I'll mention about Photolab is it has something called the, what do they call it here? The DxO wide gamut. I did a whole video about wide gamut and why it's kind of a big deal. But when you're editing your photos, the raw image has no color space assigned to it. You're getting all of the colors that that sensor can possibly capture. But then when you're editing the photo, you have to convert it to a color space so that you can see the colors on your monitor. And that conversion process, and it's purely for visual. It doesn't affect the raw image, right? There's like Lightroom uses ProPhoto. Uh, the problem is the ProPhoto and some other color gamuts, they go outside of the visible range of the human eye. And what happens is, and it goes outside of the range of color in general. So there's a lot of imaginary colors in ProPhoto that we can't see and we cannot edit. So what happens is when you're editing in ProPhoto, there's a conversion going on to display on your screen, and ultimately when you export to share, that may not be as accurate. It may oversaturate a particular color channel, or it may desaturate, or it may shift the color a little bit. So what DxO wide gamut tries to do is work within actual colors that are available from the raw image, as well as what's in our range of our human eye. And it does this conversion so that when you're editing your photo, you're not editing colors that aren't there, imaginary colors. So like I said, I have a whole video on that, but what that means, and you're going to get more realistic colors, you're going to get better uh, uh, control over your colors, and what you see on your monitor is going to be exactly what you see when you export them and share them with other people. Because sometimes people export their photos and then they look at the JPEG, the export, and it's like, oh, that's not exact, something's off, right? Some of the colors are off. And that's what DxO wide gamut tries to solve. by working within this color space that they designed. So I see a quick question here. Can you explain the use of AEL? Yeah, that's more camera related, but just very briefly, it stands for auto exposure lock. And what you do is you set your exposure in your camera. You know, that's assuming you're like an auto ISO or some sort of program mode, aperture priority, shutter priority, where you have some control over the exposure, but you're letting the camera control other elements. And once you have an exposure that you want, you lock that exposure, and it's not going to try to continually adjust the exposure. That's all it does. And Siam says, haven't used DxO earlier. Would you list the shortcomings on this versus Lightroom, or why you picked it over Topaz? So I did touch on a couple of things. Um, okay, let me just read this question one more time. The shortcomings. So I've talked about the shortcomings, versus Lightroom, because Lightroom has HDR, panorama, and focus stacking. But I would argue you get better results using third party. Uh, you get, I mean, you get great results with Lightroom, right? For the most part. But uh, that's one of the major shortcomings or differences. Uh, Now, when it comes to denoising and optical corrections and sharpening, DxO is, in my opinion, superior. And why did I pick it over Topaz? So I did have Topaz. They sent me a license. I never use it because, I do a lot of photo editing. So all these photo editing companies send me licenses, even though when I don't ask for it, I said, I'll just download the free trial and see what I think. And then like a couple days later, they send me a license, says, try the whole thing for as long as you want. But anyway, uh, yeah, I found that the denoising and detail level that I could get out of Photolab was again superior to what I could do in Topaz. And we're talking about only the denoising op module. Uh, Now, I will give Topaz some credit to the removing motion blur and the sharpening. It's all AI generated, not AI generated uh, in your computer, but the algorithms were AI generated, and then using them on your computer just references what has already been programmed in. So it's not like denoising or sharpening and deblurring with AI directly. It's just using algorithms developed by AI, which is true of Photolab. But the key difference is the demosaicing part of Photolab of denoising and optical corrections at the, well, just the denoising part at the conversion point of the raw data versus Topaz and other software I found denoises after it's been demosaicked. Uh, so that's and I did compare Topaz to DxO, and I don't want to put any shade on, too much shade. I'm putting a little, right? But I don't want to discount the capabilities of Lightroom and Topaz and all these other denoising software. All of them do an okay job, right? And maybe enough for most people. So if you're already using this other software and you're happy with the results there, just keep using it. You don't need to buy Photolab, because why spend more when, just getting a little better quality or a little better denoising is not going to make much difference in your photography, because for a lot of people it doesn't. They're very content with the noise straight out of camera a lot of times, right? They're not worried about it. I think like Robin Wong is very content with the results straight out of camera, and just does a little bit of retouching. He doesn't do much editing at all, so he wouldn't be really an ideal candidate for DxO. But for me, I do a lot of birding, and I'm always at very high ISOs a lot of the times. Probably 90% of the time I'm at ISOs like 6400. And the denoising algorithm is critical to me extracting the the detail that I want. And I'll show you a really good example. I took the same picture of a bird at ISO 6400 and ISO 100, and the differences are minor between the two images after denoising and applying the same editing to both images. So that's, to answer your question, that's why I picked it over anything else. Okay, not just Lightroom and Topaz, but everything else that I've tried, which includes, I even tried Luminar and some other ones, is because of the end result is the very best in my opinion, particularly the fine details that I get out because of this denoising at the demosaicing level. And oh yeah, so the, like the it's a raw editor, and black and white cameras, like I have a Pentax monochrome, the K3 Mark III monochrome. It does not support black and white because there's no demosaicing going on. Demosaicing is the process of taking the red, green, and blue pixels that are on color sensors and arranging them and converting them so you can see them on your screen. For black and white, it doesn't have to do that, right? All you're looking at is the tonal level of each pixel. So yeah, it would be nice if they could like let you apply the denoising to black and white images, but the algorithm is designed for Bayer sensors and as well as the whatever that one Fuji has. So it does support Fuji directly with a specific algorithm. So they're going to have to develop a new algorithm for black and white non-Bayer type sensors, right? Which hopefully they'll do. But yeah, so what I end up doing sometimes is converting it to a TIFF and then editing the photo. Now, when you convert to TIFF for your black and white images, make sure you export in the highest, and it sounds weird, but export it in the biggest color gamut, Pro Photo. That way you're getting as much information as possible about each pixel. I haven't tested, I'm thinking academically here, but I'm going to export to TIFF in Pro Photo so that I always have the maximum color range in my color photos. And academically, I think that'll give me more flexibility in my black and white monochrome images. But I haven't tested that. I'm just kind of giving my best guess, in other words. And thank you, Rob. So AAL is meant to be used in any semi-auto mode, not in manual. Correct. Because in manual mode, you're setting all of the exposure parameters, so it's the exposure is locked based on your settings when you use manual mode, with the exception of auto ISO in manual mode. If you have auto ISO, but you're controlling aperture and shutter speed, then AEL will lock the exposure. Basically, it's going to lock the ISO. But generally, when we talk about manual, we talk about controlling all three exposure values. And Enrique says, you suggest waiting for the Fuji X-T6 instead of getting the X-T5 right now. Currently, I'm using, yes. So let me address some of the non-DxO Photolab questions towards the end. I just want to kind of get a lot of the questions out of the way. So, because a lot of people are going to be watching this not live, right? So I want to try to get those questions done first. But okay. All right, so that's Nick Collection. There's Film Pack 8 out, which is, the idea is to emulate actual film stock that used to be available, like Kodak Tri-X or Kodak, whatever their colors are, I forget. I don't use Film Pack 8. There's a lot of presets and everything in DxO. If you look, I'll just give you kind of the basic idea is color film, has a certain look to it, right, from the film. And in my opinion, cannot be replicated consistently using a digital camera with these Film Pack 8 presets or any film simulation uh, software out there, not just Film Pack 8. I think Film Pack 8 does the best job because of uh, the research and uh, work that they put into it. But the idea being is to reproduce the color response that a certain film stock has from a digital raw image. And they have a lot of different film packs. You can download the free trial and see what you think. And I think that image to image, if you're looking at a single image, you can exactly duplicate that same image if it was taken with film, right? So if you have a film camera side by side with a digital, you can do it on a single image with a little bit of, not a little bit, sometimes a lot, but with some tweaking, you can duplicate that. But as soon as you go to the next image, you're not going to be able to apply the same settings and adjustments that you made with that other image to the next image to get the same exact reproduction. And therein lies the problem with trying to simulate film with a digital camera, is because film has a very fluid response because it's organic, a very fluid response to lighting conditions and colors. And every film stock has a different color response, uh, which they've tried to duplicate, but it's very, very difficult to do. So I generally don't recommend the film pack. It does have one additional tool that I wish they would just put into Photolab, and that has to do with luminosity masking, I believe. So you're funny, Eric. Enrique. He did say ask anything. Uh, but anyhow, uh, so I would say just just take the film simulations, whatever software it is, including DxO's own Film Pack 8, with a grain of salt, that you're going to get a reproduction of the actual film stock that was available, because a lot of them aren't available anymore, right? And then there's Pure Raw. Pure Raw is basically just a denoising algorithm. They did introduce some new masking tools and uh, some workflow tools so that you can batch, edit images before bringing them into your photo editor. So Pure Raw is not a photo editor. It is simply a denoising and optics module to give you the best raw file that's been demosaicked and optically corrected possible for your photo editing software. Uh, so if you like using the software that you're using, so let's say for example you use the software that came with the OM system cameras like Workspace, you can denoise all of the images in uh, Pure Raw, export them as a TIFF file, and then edit them in Workspace, however you please. Uh, but you don't need to buy Pure Raw and Photolab. Photolab includes the Pure Raw functions. Most people like to use Pure Raw with Lightroom because there's very, very good integration between Lightroom or Adobe products and Pure Raw built in to Pure Raw 6. So there's some really good workflow things. Like I said, I don't use it, but if you want the very best denoising and optical corrections on your raw images, but you don't like the photo editing workflow in DxO Photolab, you can continue to use Lightroom or Canvas or Luminar, whatever software you use. Um, so there's that. Uh, God, it just came to me what it was I was going to mention earlier, and then it's gone again. Okay, so that's Pure Raw. Uh, and there's also Viewpoint 5. I don't see a need for Viewpoint 5 unless you're extremely critical about your geometry in architecture. Um, you'd have to ask somebody that uses that all the time. I found that I can do enough perspective corrections, like, skewing and other distortions. It's just fine with the tools that I have available in Photolab. Nick Collection, like I said, just added this perspective correction thing in the module, which I'll have to look into. But, so I would recommend either you get the combo pack of Pure Raw and Nick Collection with, if you're already using a photo editor that you like, could be a free one, Workspace, Canva, or paid ones like Lightroom and Luminar. If you like those software already, Pure Raw and Nick Collection are excellent additions to those. Photolab is really all you need. Unless you want to do HDR, then you want to add Nick Collection, or you do a lot of black and white. Nick Collection has an excellent black and white photo editor, as well as a bunch of other tools that you can get into. If you're the more creative type, graphic art design, Nick Collection is good. Really the only weakness in Nick Collection, because in theory, you could get Pure Raw Nick Collection, and you could use Pure Raw to denoise and optically correct the image, and then use Nick Collection to edit your image, because it has a lot of the same tools that you find in Photolab. The key difference is that Photolab, you can do cropping, okay? You cannot crop in Nick Collection. So if I want to crop in or change the aspect ratio to 16:9, you can't do that in Nick Collection. You have to work with the entire image. So there's that. Now, if there's some workaround to that, maybe you can figure something out. But as it is, Nick Collection and Pure Raw don't crop an image. So, and I crop every image, even if it's just a little bit, slight horizon correction, or, changing the aspect ratio for framing or displaying, or for, composition reasons, right? So you can get away with, because I've heard people say just buy Nick Collection and Pure Raw, you don't need anything else. And I would argue that would be a mistake. You really need a photo editor, right, that does everything. So I would start with Photolab. I would add Nick Collection next. If you don't need the photo editing part, then Nick Collection and Pure Raw is a great combination. They do have a combo pack where you can save a little money there and then take 20% off of that. Okay, so, gosh, I've been on for 43 minutes. I haven't even shown an image yet. So let's look at the workflow. Uh, let me just take a relatively simple image here. So this is an image that I've already processed. Let me show you the side by side. This was the original image here on the left, and here's an edited image on the right. And this was at ISO 6400. And if I zoom in, you can see how much cleaner the image is, how much detail I was able to extract. And this is cropped in quite a bit as well, because I can compare it to the original image. So I cropped in right here. But I think it just did a tremendous job. Another good image to look at is this one. Here's the raw image. This also is ISO 6400. And this is my edited image using DxO. And you can just see how much detail and how much noise it was able to take out. Now, I took this same picture. This is the one that I took at ISO 100 as well. So I'm going to set this as the reference. And then I'm going to compare it to this image on the right. I took it ISO 100. So let me just back out real quick and then we'll look at the fine detail. So this one on the left is ISO 6400. This one on the right is ISO 100. So this is maximizing, you know, the sensor's capability. So let's punch in and see how this compares. It's pretty close. I mean, I'm at, let's make it 200%. I'm at 200% magnification. And you can see like under the chin, around the eye, into the wing, how clean, you know, the ISO 6400 image is compared to the ISO 100. Now the ISO 100 image did extract more detail, clearly, right? Like I can see a little bit of a crisscrossing in the feather detail here versus over here, it's only pulling out the most prominent details in the wing. Now there's a little bit of a depth of field issue here. I wonder if I change the aperture. But it pulled in a lot of detail down here. But you can see at ISO 6400, this is a shadow area. Yeah, we lost the detail here quite a bit. Whereas down here, you can see we did recover some of the details here in the shadow area. Like in the wing here, you can see we recovered some of the details in the wing, whereas it got lost in ISO 6400. But overall, as a regular bird photographer, I'm completely happy with this image at ISO 6400. And I'd happily share that on my social media. Compared to, say, the original, that's the original. Oh, wait, let me go back to, this is the original RAW. So it's really amazing what can be done. But I wanted to eliminate the myth that because I've heard this time to time is, you know, I'm not worried about noise anymore. I don't care because I have DxO. Let's be realistic. There's no substitute for shooting at a lower ISO and reducing noise, right? You're always going to get more detail in a low ISO image than you will a high detail, as I just showed. So definitely always use best practices when you're doing your photography. You know, learn the craft for exposure and all of that. But DxGo can definitely save a lot of images that were, you know, just totally gone. Like this is a great example. I think I've showed this one before. And I'm going to compare, oops, hard drive is spinning up. So let me compare, 1 second. Has this been processed or not? This has not been processed. So let me just go ahead and apply. But this one's at ISO 51,000. So I'm just going to apply one of my presets that I have here. I'm just going to, and I make presets time to time. I'm going to try and build up that library and I give them away for free. But look at the difference here. So this is at 100%. This image is totally gone. It was in low light. You can see I'm at like 51,000, 1/500th of a second. So I was in pretty low light. It wasn't dark, but it was low light. And it took an image which was just really a train wreck and gave me something semi-presentable. Now, this is a depth of field, but let's find an area that is kind of in the shadows. But you can see what an amazing job it does at extracting detail and getting rid of the noise. And this is why I always, you know, this is why a lot of people say I don't worry about noise anymore. But and I really don't. I don't worry about noise so much anymore because of DxO. So in a broad statement, yes, as a broad statement, you don't have to worry about noise anymore when it comes to your high ISO images and DxO. But ultimately, if you want the maximum detail, there's no substitute for best practices, right? Okay, so those are the key things. Now, looking at DxO, I'll try and make a tutorial on this, but this is the DxO uh, workspace, right? When you start out with the photo library. Now, DxO doesn't have a cataloging system like Lightroom and some other software. It does have a catalog, which maintains like the metadata information and keywords, things like that, ITPC info that you can search for, right? So there's a search box. I can go in here and I can say, find me all the images with 1 star that I took this year. Like that's something I just recently did. So these are all of my images that I assigned 1 star to in 2026. So the catalog is made primarily for the metadata and searching. But I can navigate to any folder even if it has never been indexed before. So let me go to my PC. And again, the hard drives need to spin up. We'll go into D drive 2026. And I can just like, I'm playing around with this D200 somebody gave me. And there's some filters here. So you can select some images. Oh, there's nothing. Oh, here, this folder. But I can navigate to any folder and I don't have to worry about the catalog or saving to the catalog or repairing the catalog or, the cataloging system in Lightroom has its pros and cons, but it's the Achilles heel of the Lightroom workflow is if your catalog gets corrupted, it or, and this has happened to me, it's a problem because a lot of people built their entire, I guess, indexing and the way they manage their photos through Lightroom's cataloging system. And it's certainly very powerful, but it's a lot of overhead on the system. What I'm trying to say is DxO doesn't do that. DxO is just very straightforward. You can just go to any folder, right, and navigate it. And like I said, there's sort of this background catalog in DxO. If it gets deleted, it's not a big deal because all of your edits and everything are saved in a sidecard file together with the uh, image itself. So if I go to my Windows Explorer, you'll see like this .dop file. As long as you don't delete that file, all of the edits you made to the file are always saved together with the image. So it's a non-destructive workflow, which I think is kind of a given these days. So um, you don't have to worry about cataloging your images. You can do searches on images as long as they're indexed. So if I added, say, 3 new folders of images, because I use like Adobe Bridge to import my photos, if I don't navigate to those folders in DxO doesn't know, will not be able to search for that because it hasn't indexed the metadata yet. So if I was shooting with a brand new lens and I import those into my computer, and then I immediately try to search for those photos, DxO is not going to see them because it hasn't indexed that folder. So what you have to do is open that folder like this. Just go to that folder and open it. And now it's indexing the metadata when you go into that folder. Because that was a question from Marlene, about the cataloging and all of that. And that's basically, there's no uh, cataloging in DxO. Um, okay, now DxO has some other tools. Like I said, there's the search bar here. You can search on keywords and just about any metadata. So if I want to search by camera or search by lens or search by aperture, I can do all of that as long as I've indexed it. Um, in fact, I think there's a DxO database, create a backup or restore the optics. Let's see, metadata, read from files, sidecards, import, export. There's a bunch of things in here that if you do run into some problems, or let's say you deleted a folder and then you recover it, but not everything got recovered. There's ways to kind of recover things. I'm not going to get into that, but just know that it's a very straightforward uh, system of just navigating to different folders, right? So and there's all kinds of things, like when I do my culling, I give 1 star to everything. And this is not a tutorial on how to cull your images, but uh, this is where I was using Nick Collection HDR. This is a good before and after. But you can see what a difference you can make in your images, because the workflow is very, very intuitive. Okay, so let me see if there's any questions. It says, I see Nick Collection shows, whoops. I see Nick Collection shows beside the export to disk. But yours is full-blown editor. Does that button reduce some features and opens up a clutter-free tool? And on cataloging, what do you use? How do you finish culling after a trip? I struggle here a lot too. Okay, I can cover that. Let me see if I can address this question. You need to reword that a little bit. I don't exactly know what you mean. I see Nick Collection shows beside the export to disk. Like on mine, export to disk, these are all the options I get. So this is the export to disk. And let me open up Nick Collection on one of these images. So I haven't edited this one yet. So let me apply just the default preset that I created and then export. Let's open up Nick Collection and then we'll look at the export to disk on Nick Collection. I like to use HDR effects a lot. Even on a single image, I use Nick HDR. I like the presets that are available. All right, we'll give it a minute. Now, processing speed is going to vary based on the kind of computer you have. Typically, it takes about 10 seconds to denoise and process an image. If I have a lot more edits, it might take 15 or 20 seconds. On other computers, it might take you a few minutes. And other computers, it might be almost instantaneous. A lot of people that have Macs say it's very, very fast, 6 seconds, right? Okay, so I don't see an export to disk. Oh, there's a Nick Collection. Okay, I understand what you mean now. All right. I think this is what you mean. So, like I did, I just because I have Nick Collection installed, I have this Nick Collection button next to the export to disk. So when I click on it, I can select which Nick Collection module I want to use. In this case, I've picked HDR. There are export settings down here. I recommend TIFF 16-bit, ICC profile, these are the color profiles. I would do it as shot. That's fine. Or you can select Pro Photo. That may be a better option. Preserve color details. So these are the settings I generally use to maximize editing a TIFF file, because when you go into Nick Collection, it's going to use this file format and then bring it back into Photolab, where you're going to edit the TIFF file in this case. I should have selected Pro Photo, the maximum, because typically the built-in profile is sRGB. But yeah, that's all that does. Now, when you're in Nick Collection, I have a couple of presets I like to use that I created. This is one of them. I like the, I just was feeling like having a very gritty, but you can see it has a lot of the same tools over here that you have in Photolab. But as you can see, there's no way to crop this image, right? But let me apply this, and we'll just do a quick comparison. But you can very quickly edit an image, because I think the workflow is very, very intuitive. Let me see. Let me reset this. Oops, no. So I'm going to create this as a reference, and then compare it to that image. I mean, just in a couple of seconds, I took a rather plain image and converted it very quickly in Nick Collection HDR. And I think this is almost ready to go as is. I might crop it a little, but not much. But I can continue editing this if I want. Just to customize, and then I can crop. Maybe I just want that part. Okay, let me see. And on cataloging, what do you use to finish calling after a trip? I struggle here a lot. Yeah, so this is from the day before. This was from Tuesday. Where's my mouse? This is from Tuesday. I took 1,264 images, and I've already culled them down to these 48 images, right? And what I do is basically, I just scroll through these images very quickly. Typically, I have this screen up here. And then as I'm going along, if I like an image, let me just look at the raws. First I just go to the raw images. And maybe I like this one. I'll just give it a star. So I hit Control-1 on my keyboard, and now I have a little star. So that might be one I want to keep. And then I just keep going through these. I don't like any of these. Maybe I like this little water fountain, so I'll just give it a star. I'll give that a star. And a lot of times I'll do exposure bracketing, like I did on these three images. So these three here, you can see I assigned it 2 stars because this is kind of a group of 3 exposure bracketed images. And once I've gone through this, I'm really, really fast. I just go through all of these like this. Like here's one I kind of like. I might star that one. And then after I'm done, I just go to my filter and I say, okay, show me all the 1-star and 2-star images. If I'm going to look at the exposure bracketed ones, I can just say, show me the 2-star images. So the 2-star images are basically exposure bracketing. And then the 1-star images is everything else that I kind of liked out of the set. which isn't very many out of 1,200 images. So that's how I cull. And then once I'm done, once I've selected all the ones that I want, what I do is I say, okay, reset. I select all the ones that have no stars, and I select unprocessed, just in case. Just in case I did edit one, but I forgot to put a star, I just select unprocessed. So right now you can see, hopefully, there's 1,130 images here selected, but if I uncheck this, there's 16 images here that I processed, because now we're up to 1146 that I forgot to star. So I'm going to go ahead and click unprocessed. Or if I want to find those images, I can say, what did I process and what's modified since I processed? So here's a bunch of images that I forgot to put a star next to. So I can select all of these, put a star, and now I can do unprocessed with no star. Right? So these are all the images I don't care about anymore. I'm not really done calling this, but I can just do select all and then shift delete. And are you sure you want to delete these 1,100 images? I'm not going to do it now, but usually what happens after about a week or 2 weeks, if I haven't gone back to that folder, I just delete them all. I don't even bother looking again. But that's how I do my culling. There's a Nick collection button, and okay, got it. And Paul says, Rob, one frustration I have is that the user discount film pack and viewpoint is only available if you own a previous version. Unlike Photolab, which goes back 2 versions. Oh, I didn't know that. I do know, yeah, I should have mentioned that in the beginning, is that if you're upgrading or buying Photolab 9, if you're upgrading to Photolab 9, you need to have Photolab 7 or 8 installed, or have purchased 7 or 8. If you had Photolab 6, you can't upgrade to Photolab 9. You have to just outright buy it, which is unfortunate. They should go back 3 versions, in my opinion, at least 3. But Film Pack and Viewpoint, that would be really frustrating. You basically have to upgrade from the previous version. You can only go back 1. I agree. That would be frustrating. Also, you only get the luminosity masking if you have current version of Film Pack. It is not available if you have a previous version. So I touched on this a little bit earlier. Luminosity masking is only available if you have Film Pack installed. So let me show you what that is. It's not a deal breaker for me, but let me find an image that has some good tonal variation. This one's not. Well, let me find a raw image that has good tonal variation. So this image here, right? Let's say I'm going to select, well, this is a pretty flat image. Hold on. This one has some good variation, right? We have some really strong highlights, some midtones, like this red, and then some darker tones down here. So over here in the local adjustment panel, there's actually 2 hue mask, but this is the one that Paul is referring to, luminosity mask. You only get this if you have Film Pack installed. So I click on that, and then I can select a tone or luminosity. So I'm selecting everything with that tonal range. And then right under here, I can make adjustments. I can expand it so it captures more. I can feather it or not feather it so it's a little bit harder capture. Or I can just pick a grayscale somewhere. So I said, okay, give me all the midtones, which is like number 5, right? This is the Ansel Adams scale, I guess. And then I can make adjustments. So I'm going to pick, say, all of the highlights at level 10 and then just pull them in a bit. So I can select just the highlights and adjust it. So that's with the luminosity mask. The reason it's not really a deal breaker for me is I can do pretty much the same thing. So let me delete this. I can do pretty much the same thing with like a control line. I can just grab the control line, move the eyedropper over here to the highlights, and do the same thing, right? Because within the control line and control points for that matter, I have chroma, color masking and luminosity masking here. So it's a little bit coarser, a little bit rougher way to do it. For my photo editing and the images that I edit, this is more than good enough, has enough precision for me. But yeah, the luminosity mask, so let me hide this. Let me just compare that. So let me hide it. We'll add a new mask using the luminosity, and then I'll pick this. And we'll do the same thing. So that compared to, this is with the control line. I'm going to turn this off. This is with the luminosity tool. It's very, very little difference, right? So yeah, I get where you're coming from. The luminosity tool gives you a lot more control. But I find that the luminosity masking with the control points and control lines is good enough. When searching for F8, is there a way to only search the current folder? Yes. So typically, like in Lightroom, if I select this folder like DC Photo Walk right here, and then I search, and I want to search for F8, right? What it's going to do, it's not going to search only that folder. It's going to search the entire index or every folder it's ever indexed. Remember I talked about the indexing before. So you can see right now F8 has 27,000 images, right? 27,186. So we're going to select that, and then I'm going to select this folder, right? I'm sorry. What I have to do is do two things. Ugh. I think it's my hard drive needs to spin up. Hold on. We'll wait for that. I have like 4 different hard drives plugged into my laptop, so time to time I get these things. All right, it's come back. All right. So what I do is I'm going to search for images in that folder, right? So I can just type in 2026-0707 because the way I organize my folders is by date, chronologically by date. So I can select that, and this is the date over here. And then I can add in F8 and select that one. So now I've selected everything taken on July 7th, which are all in this folder at F8. So these are all the images. So I did a lot of focus stacking at F8. Hopefully that answers your question. Now, if you don't use a if you don't group your images by date, and you just want to search, it's going to be a little bit trickier. I've never tried this, but I wonder if I can search by folder name. DC Photo Walk folder and F8. Yeah, that works. So I named this folder DC Photo Walk. I didn't have to put the whole name in with the date 2026-0707 DC Photo Walk. All I had to do was type in Photo Walk. And then I added F8 So that's how you do individual folders. Okay. Siam says it gives a moral boost to see that Rob makes some overly exposed photos too at time. Yes. I like this about Rob, never shies away from showing what he really does and not just show the best of thousands. Yeah, I mean, that's real life of every photographer. We all take uh, bad photos, right? You know, I eventually delete them all because I take thousands of photos and then I cull them down to about 40 or 50, maybe 100, and then I delete the rest. More so now because of how expensive hard drives are getting. And Paul says you can work around the luminosity masking by using the gradient and putting eyedropper in the area you want to alter. Yep. So yeah, as you said, you probably wrote that before I demonstrated it. So, but I did demo how to do that. So I work around. That's sort of a workaround. It's not, again, it doesn't have the same sort of precision and flexibility that the luminosity tool does, but it gets you like probably 80% there, right? Okay, let's do a quick demo of my workflow. All right, so after, let's say basically I use Adobe Bridge to import the images from my camera to my computer. And I put it into a folder, like I put these into a folder. These are the images from Tuesday. I put these into the folder using Adobe Bridge. Now I can just go to it in DxO Photo Lab. So I'm in the photo library mode and there's a customize mode. So what I do is I select an image I want to edit. Let's say this one. And then I say customize like this. And the first thing I do is I apply a, a basic or default preset, right? So let's use one of the DxO's standard. This is you get a bunch of presets with DxO down here that you can, go crazy with. I rarely go down those. I rarely do that because those are someone else's ideas, right? But there are presets that come with it that you do want to use, like this DxO standard. So DxO standard applies basic noise reduction. Let me check the other one here. Apply preset, DxO natural. Since I created my own preset, I rarely use these anymore. So you can start with DxO standard or DxO natural. DxO standard tries to maintain or uses its own color profile. Now from here, what I would do is I would go to the noise reduction panel, then just apply D prime XD3. The optics module's been applied here, chromatic aberration. Typically, I'll just click on this star button and also purple fringing. So that maximizes all of the optical corrections from the DxO module. So after I apply the DxO standard, I apply DxO prime, XD3, prime XD3. I apply, the auto correction here and purple fringing, and that's it. And then I start to look at the overall exposure. This image is exposed properly for the main subject, which is the Capitol building, but not the sky, right? The sky is a bit overexposed. So I'm going to have to adjust the sky exposure manually or in the local adjustments panel. But I don't see, if I go over here to the light panel or exposure panel, I really don't need to change anything. DxO Smart Lighting's been applied. DxO Smart Lighting tries to adjust the highlights and shadows automatically, right? I usually leave this off because I like to adjust the exposure myself. So I'm going to turn that off. But now the exposure is a little bit too bright. So usually go right to the well, I'm sorry, before I go to local adjustments, I do any cropping and geometry changes that I want to make. So first you do the DxO standard preset, you apply D prime 3, uh, the purple fringing, and then I turn off smart lighting. Now I'm going to do some geometry. So I'll go over to the geometry panel, and I can see the horizon looks like it's a little bit crooked, maybe 1 or 2 degrees. I can turn the horizon correction on here and see if it makes any correction. It made a very, very slight adjustment here. Or I can use this tool and just do it myself like this. And then I can move over. I'm just going to zoom in and just make sure I got it exactly on that line. This side needs to be just a tiny bit higher. And let's hit enter. Now this image is at f22, so it's going to be a little soft. So you can see it adjusted it. When I did it manually, the auto rarely works. So I usually do it manually just by eye, or I use this line tool. The other thing you can see that we have a certain skewing distortion, right? So we need to correct for that. Or if we want to, I want to. So I'm going to click the auto perspective, and that'll straighten it out. So that, because you can see the building felt like it was leaning backwards a little bit. So I'm going to use the auto on this works probably 80% of the time. It works really well. Now I'm going to go back to my cropping tool. And I'm just going to make a little adjustment because I can see, if you look at the center of the image here, is a little bit off, right? So I'm just going to move this over just a tiny bit. So now that the center of the building is there, and then I'm going to check the sides here. The sides look good. And I'm just going to move this up just a little bit. So I think that's all the geometry changes I want to make. So if we compare, whoops. So that's without any optical corrections and perspective corrections. Okay, so, and the exposure is fine for the building, but I want to adjust for the sky. So that, now that I've done, let me just check my notes, make sure I do that. So when you're editing all the time, you kind of, you skip steps that you don't need to do, but I don't want to skip anything. So I did the optics, I did the noise reduction, I did the geometry, perspective, and cropping. Composition decisions I made because I wanted to center the image. And then okay, so now we're going to go into the exposure. So if the image was over or underexposed, I would adjust for that here. But the image is not really overexposed or underexposed in general, right? But I could make adjustments here. I kind of like the exposure of the building. Maybe it's a little bit bright. I'll just bring it down a little bit. Maybe a half a stop. Once I've got the exposure, geometry, everything else, now I'm going to go over into my local adjustments. And we have some terrific AI tools here. So I'm going to select the AI tool here. And then when I bring my mouse over into the working window here, I have a lot of choices here. I can just point and select something. I can box something in. So right now I can point to the sky. It's just going to select the sky. I can point to the people individually. I can point to the building, and it's going to select parts of the building. You just move your mouse around and it might select the whole building, right? Or parts of the building, depending where you point to. Or I can use this box tool, and I can just box in. Let's say I want to box in all these people. You know, I can do that. I can just box box in just that part there. So you have sort of a box tool, you can box things in like that. So I just want to select the front and make it a little brighter. Okay, so let me just delete those. But what I want to do is I have this, I can do select sky, where it'll, intelligently select the sky, or I can select, let's say, people, and it's going to select all the people. Let's see if it finds any animals. Nope. Didn't find any flowers, didn't find any vehicles. And I think the people are too small to select hair, faces, and oh, it did find clothing though. Look at that. So I can brighten up everybody's clothes. But let's just select sky. So now I've selected the sky. And then I can use these tools here to sort of bring the sky in. I like to use clear view a lot. Make the sky a little bit dramatic. I think that looks pretty good. And I can see I have a little sensor spot here. So I'll do that. Yeah, I can do that now. I have repair and clone. I'm just going to use the repair. Let me just feather this a bit more. And just get rid of that spot. All right. Now let me select the building. Let's see. I wonder if I can do select subject, if it'll find it. No. So let me do it with the box tool. See if I can select the building with the box tool. Yeah, there we go. What I want to do with the building is I'm going to add some contrast in there like that. Maybe pull the highlights down just a tiny bit. And then just add a little bit of saturation or vibrancy and tiny bit of clear view. Okay, I'm going to select the sidewalk. Whoops. So we'll go back to the AI tool. I can select the sidewalk. I'm going to make that very gritty. A lot of nice texture in there. And now I'm going to create a new mask and select the grass. See if I can get in there. Yep, that one. That's good enough. Just increase the saturation of the grass. I think that's it. So let's just do a comparison side by side. But that's the basic workflow. So let me just double check here. So we did yeah, okay, so that's it now. Really all that's left to do is to export this, right? So I'm going to do export to disk. And I have a bunch of different options here. I usually just do standard JPEG, 100%. I export it to a custom folder that I call for Instagram. And I rename it. Usually, now you can have all kinds of custom names, right? It's pretty advanced that way. Usually I just add a suffix. So I add the suffix DXO 9_9_9_1_721. And I'm going to take that letter B off. I was doing something earlier. Usually in the name, I usually add what version of DXO I used to edit this image. So I have the file name OM306735-DXO-9.9.1721. And I'm going to turn off enable resizing because I want to export the entire resolution. A lot of times I have to resize things for different forums and social media that I participate in. They won't accept large images, so I have to downsize them quite often. I'm going to pick sRGB as the export color profile, and then I'm going to do preserve color details, because what it does is, again, this goes back to the wide gamut color space that DxO uses. When you click on the preserve color details, it's when you export and do that conversion from the raw image to sRGB, it's going to work within that DxO wide gamut and not like oversaturate things or shift the colors to the wrong color. This is going to be the most accurate reproduction of color possible. So that's why I always check preserve color details. And then I'll export this. But it's going to look exactly the same, the JPEG. But when it exports, we'll look at it. And you have a progress bar down here. I can see it's taking, in this case, it's taking, what, 20 seconds again, right? 26 seconds today, running slow. It's a little faster when I'm not live streaming, but this image is taking a while for whatever reason. Oh, this is a high res file. That's why. So 38 seconds to export a high resolution file, which is like 50 megapixels in on Micro Four Thirds. So let's go to my folder here. Let's see. My hard drives need to spin up. Okay, here it is. All right, so here's the exported image. And we can compare that to this image. And you can see it exactly reproduced. What I saw when I was editing the image and what I got when I exported it. Okay, any questions about my workflow or anything about DxO Photolab or any of the other tools that I use? I did show Nik Collection a little bit. I can show one, let me show an HDR image using Nik Collection. So going back to how I call things, I know all of my photo bracketed shots have 2 stars. And I just want the raw images, and we'll go from here. So let's try, yeah, let's do this one. I've done these already. See if there's anything new. I haven't done this one yet, I don't think. That's not a good one. I haven't done this one yet. So these three, here's another set of bracketed images. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply, I'm going to apply my default preset that I've created, which automatically does a lot of the things that I talked about. But when I have all 3 images selected, I'm going to turn off the optical correction here, the distortion correction specifically. So I prefer the fisheye look on this particular image. So I'm going to turn that off. And it did it to all 3 images. Now I'm going to go to Nik Collection. I'm going to go to HDR effects. And what it's going to do, it's going to export those 3 raw images into a TIFF format that I can use to edit with in Nik Collection HDR. So if we look at the progress here, you can see, let's see. It exported all 3 images in 20 seconds because I didn't have a lot of, these aren't high-res images. They're only 20 megapixel each, so it did it a lot faster. So let me go over to, oh, there it is, Nick Collection HDR. So this is kind of a preview. It's a lot darker than it really is, but I'm going to go ahead and you want to make sure alignment correction is checked because I was hand holding this when I did the bracketing, but even when I'm on a tripod, I always have alignment correction. Ghost reduction, I typically set that to very low, like strength of 30%. That works for most things, and I don't have to worry about chromatic aberration because it's already been corrected in Photolab. So I never check this box. So we'll go ahead and click on Create HDR. And I'm going to zoom out. So this is the standard HDR image, which is default, the default HDR. And I guess we can kind of compare. Oh, not yet. But this is what it created. I like to use a lot of the presets they have. Like here's balanced. I don't use this one very much. This is the deep. I like that one. Deep 2, that one's okay. But there's so many presets here. Bright. I even created my own here. I call Rob Sinister, which is a very gritty preset. There's a bunch here. You can, the surreal one, let's see. Natural sharp, that's not bad. So I like a lot of the presets, and I can apply these to a single image, but we're going to use, let's do architecture, and let's select indoor. I don't like any of these. Natural bright. I like that one. Let me go back. What's the default? Let's use the default. So we're going to do apply. You also have an option down here for non-destructive edits, and there's a bunch of other things over here that you can control. You can increase the depth to strong, or basically that's, you know, just adjust these to taste. Realistic, detailed, grungy, soft. We'll leave it on realistic, and then there's drama. Well, I like that. I like that one right there. And then we have standard exposure controls here. Saturation. So you can do a lot of editing right here in Nick Collection. We'll just take a stand. We're not going to make any adjustments here. We'll just click apply. So I click apply, and it's going to go back into Photolab. And I filtered out all the TIFF images. So let me put those back in. It's going to be down here. It's because I sorted by file extension. Let's see, which one was it? There's one of these, this one. If I had sorted by file name, it would be right next to the 3 bracketed exposures, but I sorted by file extension. So here's the HDR version. And from here, I can just start editing to my heart's content. That's just using the auto features and then brighten it up a little bit. And let's compare that to this one. So this is the original image on the left at a normal exposure. This is the HDR image on the right with just some minor adjustments, right? But the main thing here with HDR is to sort of bring in these highlights. So you can see these are pretty much clipped and there's no detail. Versus in the HDR image, we can see that the marble and things and the flowers, there's a lot more detail in these areas with an HDR image. And if I had spent a little more time in Nick Collection, I could even brought out even more detail if I wanted to. Um, but really, I just wanted to create a realistic HDR image. You can see it brought up the shadows in here a little bit, etc., etc. So I really like the Nick HDR. I use that quite a bit for my images, even if they're not exposure bracketed, because I like the presets in them. And I like editing with the presets sometimes to get more creative look to my images. Okay, so that's Nick Collection and how I use it, but it has a bunch of other stuff as well. Um, yeah, Paul says I take lots of bad photos and send them to Rob to rescue. So yeah, that's a good reminder is I do live photo editing with DxO every Friday. And usually there's something new I do every week. Not intentionally, but because the image I'm editing calls for it. And I'm like, how do I do this? And then I'll find a tool or combine tools to create an effect or make an edit that I hadn't done the week before because of the images that you guys send me. So it's a great learning experience for both of us, right? So I encourage you, uh, and you can always ask questions in my live streams on Friday as well. Every 2 or 3 images I stop and I answer any questions you have about the edits I did or anything else related to the photo editing. So look at it as premium tech support for DxO Photolab for free. You get it for free every Friday because DxO has some options where you can buy premium support where you get faster answers and things like that. You don't have to do that. Just come to me. I'm here. I'm right here. Just come to me every if it's for Photolab, if you're asking about Nick Collection and other things, it's going to be a little harder, right? Because I'm not as familiar with those products. But with Photolab, I can probably answer 90% of the questions and demonstrate it for you live on Fridays. So definitely join me on Fridays. Send your images in. I'm having one tomorrow. It's open for submissions. You can submit your images. Okay, and I need to update my Flickr page. It misses many of your good. Oh, it is pretty updated. I mean, I don't know. Let me look. What's the last thing I posted there? Yeah, this has a lot of my stuff. Not everything, but most of it. Okay. Um, yeah, I just yawned. Sorry, but I'm doing this stream because I want you guys to see how great DxO is and buy it from me through my affiliate link. Uh, and hopefully this answered all of your questions about DxO Photolab. The best way really is join me every Friday. I'm pretty sure the discount's going to be valid tomorrow, but I'm not 100%. I know it is today because it says it ends July 10th. And my brain can never comprehend. Do you mean it turns off on July 10th or it's through July 10th, including July 10th? You know what I mean? I'm just getting old, I guess. I'm pretty sure it's good through tomorrow, but there's no need to wait. If you, for some reason, you miss the 20% deal, I have a 15% discount code, right, that you can use anytime. That one is just RobTrek. So just use the discount code RobTrek for 15% off. But if you want the 20% off, it's RobTrek Summer 2026. Okay. Any other questions? Let me just check my notes. No, I think we're good. you know, the photo editing workflow is pretty straightforward. I'll make a video on it one day. I've been promising that for the last couple of months, but I'll get around to it eventually. So that's it for today then. Thanks everyone for joining me. Um, I see Heather's here. Good to see you, Heather. Unfortunately, I can't add modules at discount, new users only. Yeah. The discounts are for new users only. So uh, that's just how they do it. I wish I've been asking for it, you know, every time they send me a discount code. Do you have anything for existing users? And it's always no. And that's their business model, and I support them. I mean, it'd be nice to have it for existing users, uh, but they don't. That's the way they run their business. It's still better than a subscription model for many people. They prefer just buying an outright license. Uh, but yeah, I totally get what you're saying. So thanks again, everyone. Use my affiliate links down below. I'll be back tomorrow for a live photo editing stream on oh, Enrique, yeah, we can talk about the XT6 now. So that ends the DxO portion. Thanks everyone for watching. But let me talk to Enrique for a minute about the XT6. I looked at it a little bit. The rumors are very, very skimpy on that, but basically it's going to have an updated processor, right? That's supposedly going to give better autofocus. And you said you're using an XT4 now. Nothing wrong with the XT4. I think that one still has the 26 megapixel sensor, which is awesome. I would not upgrade to a faulty XT5. And by faulty, I mean, you know, everyone complains about the autofocus on that thing. I think it's okay. I don't really have a big problem with it. It does miss sometimes, but you know, it works well enough for me. I have an XH2, which is essentially the same thing as an XT5. But if an XT6 is right around the corner, you buy that one, right? Worst case, you buy the XT5 at a discount because people are going to be dumping those to buy the XT6. But I would say if you're happy with the autofocus in your XT4, I don't think the XT5 is any worse than your XT4. Probably better. Okay, I can't speak personally because I don't have an XT4. But I don't see any reason not to get the XT6. It's bound to have some really nice improvements with the new processor. And they're not going to jack the price way up, because they already jacked the price up on the XT5. They can't do it again with the XT6. They could, but it wouldn't be a smart move by them. So I guarantee you're going to be able to buy the XT6 at or near the same price as an XT5 brand new. So why buy an XT5 right now? And if you want, wait for the XT6 and buy a used XT5 and you'll save some money. And yeah, you did mention that you like the X100, the 40 megapixel sensor in the X100V. Yeah, it's great. You definitely get more detail. You definitely do, especially with DxO Photolab. But I really liked, for whatever reason, when I had my XT30, just like your XT4, I really love the output from that 26 megapixel sensor more than I like what I'm getting from the 40 megapixel. If I want more detail, yeah, I'm going to use the 40, right? But right now, I don't need more detail. I really like the color that I was getting from the 26 megapixel. And having 40 megapixels doesn't matter to me. Now, if you like the colors from the 40 megapixel better than the 26 megapixel, that's another story, right? You're liking the 40 megapixels for the same reason I'm liking the 26. It has nothing to do with the resolution, and that's fine. But I know definitely for sure 100% with good processing, you definitely get more detail out of the 40 megapixel. And the colors, I mean, I think in a blind test, I probably wouldn't be able to pick out an XT30 from an XT5 in terms of color. Like if you scaled them to the same resolution. So maybe I'm just nostalgic for an XT3, or, you know, like I want to buy an XT3. But I think the logic to buy an XT6 makes sense. It's right around the corner. It's going to be the same price. I'm 99% sure it'll be the same price or very close to an XT5. And that's my logic. And it can only be better, right, with the new processor. So we'll end it there, Enrique. I hope that makes sense. Thanks again, everybody watching. Eat healthy and exercise. I'll see you guys again tomorrow for the DxO Photo Live editing stream.